My name's Dan Nelson. I'm a captain paramedic at El Dorado Hills Fire in Northern California. Started in the fire service as a volunteer in 1999 and then was moved over to El Dorado Hills Fire in 2004. Been on a lot of fires throughout California. Every summer's been very busy, especially the last few years. Seen a lot of different fires and a lot of different fire behavior, and then got to experience it for myself while living in Lahaina and going through the wildfire in August 8th in Lahaina. My wife and I had decided that we wanted to move to Maui, specifically into Lahaina, because it's kind of like a second home to us. It felt like it. And we wanted to move there for retirement. When COVID hit, things kind of changed, and we decided, why wait? Let's just go ahead and move out there now. So with the interest rates and everything, and it just worked out perfectly where we were able to sell our house here in California and move out to Maui. And we were out there for right at 2 years when the fire hit. And so we're very thankful that we were able to get out there and experience the town and live in it and be part of the community before it's completely changed how it is now, and who knows what it's going to be like in the future. So we were looking for a condo actually, because we thought that that's kind of what we could afford. And while we had already sold our home, we were looking, and all of a sudden a house came up right above the cannery in Lahaina. So Safeway, the cannery, that's kind of a main spot right there. And it had a beautiful ocean view, and we backed up to just bare land behind us. It was undeveloped at the time. So we had our perfect spot. We could wake up in the morning, have coffee, look at the ocean, watch the whales, and beautiful sunsets. It was actually better than we had ever dreamed about being able to get. So before the fire, I had taken vacation to do some work on the house. We were kind of doing a remodel on it, and everything was just kind of business as usual. Spend my days working on the house, get dirty, later on go down to the beach, clean off, go for a swim, and get refreshed and enjoy the sunset. And so the days before the fire, that's just what I was doing, day after day, working on the house. And then the day of the fire, we woke up early in the morning, about 4:30, because it was really windy. The house was shaking, it was so windy. It was kind of odd. So I thought, well, I'll just get up and start doing what I do. So we started working on the house, and my wife, Pam, smelled smoke and heard sirens. So she went outside and said, hey, there's a grass fire up on the hill behind us. So I went out and looked at it, and I thought, wow, that's not too far away, probably less than a mile away. And I hope they get a handle on it fast, because it was really windy. And looked on Google Maps to kind of see where it was, and it looked like it was kind of boxed in by the highway and by the bypass. And so I thought, they'll probably get a good handle on it and we'll be all right. So I just went back to working on the house. I was doing some sheetrock work and some painting. And in the afternoon, Pam heard sirens again and said, hey, it looks like the fire started up again. I said, wow, it's really windy now. By this time, the winds were blowing steadily at 35 to 40 mile an hour with bigger gusts. And I said, oh man, if they don't get a handle on this quick, it's gonna be a problem, because with this wind, I know how this goes. So I went back to work and on the house, and she came back in and said, you might wanna come look at this. So I went out onto the porch and looked up, and the smoke had turned really black. So that meant that there were structures burning. And so I thought, wow, this could get really bad. So I started cleaning up my tools and putting things away to kind of watch it and get a kind of pay attention to it in case things had changed. Where we were, or our house was, we had pretty good, we had the bypass coming through, and then there's a big drainage ditch there, and the wind was blowing straight down the hill toward the ocean, and the fire was to the south of us. So I felt pretty confident that we'd be okay, as long as the winds didn't change. So as the day went on, we were watching it, and more neighbors started coming up to our house because of the view of the fire. As it got darker and darker, the black smoke, you could start to hear propane tanks exploding, tires exploding, sirens everywhere, and I knew that it was going to be really bad. And I'd mentioned to my wife, that as it came down Lahaina Luna, it's kind of like a fuse coming toward the city where it's just burning down there and where it got into town. And I said, you know, if they don't get a handle on this quick, we might lose half this town. Neighbors started coming up and watching it with me, and they're asking me, you know, based on my experience, so like, what do you think? And I told all of them, I think we'll be okay as long as the wind doesn't change. So it got worse and worse as the day went on. Everybody was watching it, and we just decided to start to pack up the car with all of our important belongings, emptied the safes, put all the pictures, everything, and just loaded it up in case the wind changed. Because I saw the rate of spread of the fire and figured if it did change and come toward us, it would be there. We wouldn't have time. So we went ahead and loaded up the van and got everything into it, and just in case. And my neighbors were kind of watching me, and nobody was really doing anything either. And I thought, you know, it's kind of odd. If you see the firefighter packing up his car, you might want to do the same thing. But they chose not to, and things progressively got worse. We started loading the car with all of our belongings around 5 in the evening. I had gone over to my neighbor's house when the wind was blowing. He's lived there for just over 30 years. And I had asked him, I said, man, this wind is really strong, because by then it was blowing dust that was, you know, would blow across the cul-de-sac where you couldn't see more than 200 feet just because the dust was so thick. And I'd asked him if he'd ever seen anything like this, and he said there was one time that he could remember years ago that it was as strong or stronger than it was that day. So uncommon, but not unheard of for West Maui. As we were starting to learn that the fire was really growing, there was no internet, there was no power, there was no utilities. Everything had been taken out by the wind and the fire. So we had no news. We had no idea how big the fire was other than seeing the giant black column. Everybody started getting the hint as it got later into the evening that maybe it is going to get bad. And I started seeing people kind of leaving and coming and going. And they again asked me, what do you think? And I said, I think you guys should leave just in case. So a lot of them did, but they didn't take belongings with them, unfortunately. You know, you could hear the sirens, just see it all changing, but still the wind was blowing straight down the hill, from the top of the hill, from the east to the west, straight down toward the ocean. Later on that evening, the fire the wind started changing a little bit, and the fire jumped behind us in the grass. So there's a big grass field behind us that goes around a construction zone. So there's a giant cleared area of just bare dirt. So I had made the decision that I was going to stay there, and if things got really bad, that I could just go to that dirt area and be fine. One of my neighbors said he wanted to stay behind and help me because the retired deputy chief of Maui Fire Department lived across the street from me, and he had fire hose. We had hooked a couple hundred feet of fire hose to the hydrant, and I figured, you know, I could probably do some good if it came into our neighborhood. One of my neighbors wanted to stay behind. I said, yeah, I could use some help, but send everybody else out of here. Anyone that, you know, else living in your house, get them out of here. To the north of Lahaina, up toward Kaanapali, it gets much greener and wetter. So I knew that if the fire did come that way, eventually it would stop, you know, because it would run out of fuel of the dry grass that we had in our area. So neighbors started to leave the area and get in their cars, but I noticed they weren't really packing much with them, if anything. And so I just kind of went around my house going, what do I need to do to prepare my house if it does come this way? Our house is built on stilts. It's a pole house, kind of built like if you were to build a campfire and start it. So I was going around trying to pick up any cardboard or anything that would catch an ember that could possibly get the house going. Because if the wind changed, the ember cast is all it takes. And then some of the footage I have of when it came through the neighborhood, you can see severe ember casts and understand how trash and debris around your house can catch on fire very easily, even being away from the fire. I did that, picked up everything, and I was kind of getting thirsty. And so I went over to the refrigerator with my cup of water to get water out of the refrigerator, and there was no water. I thought, well, that's kind of weird. So I went and checked into their faucet, no water. And then I thought, well, if there's no water here, does that mean there's none in the fire hydrant? So I went down to the fire hydrant, tried to turn it on, and it was just dust. There was nothing coming out of it at all. And so at that point, I told my neighbor, Metal Mike, who had stayed behind, I said, you know what, there's nothing we can do without the water. You should just leave. You should just get out of here now and get whatever you can and bring it with you. So he ended up leaving, and one neighbor still stayed behind that lived at the chief's house across the street. And so it was just him and I kind of watching and waiting to see what was going to happen. As the fire the wind started changing and the fire started coming toward us, both police and fire came to our neighborhood to try to get people to evacuate. The first one I saw was a police officer, and he said, "You guys got to go." And I said, "Hey, I'm a firefighter in California. I'm going to be out in the dirt patch if things get bad. I'll be okay." And so they were getting people to leave, and still people were reluctant at that point. The fire engine came through. I believe it was engine 3 came through, and it was the same thing. They're like, "Hey, you got to get out of here." And I told them who I was and what my plan was, and they were just like, "Hey, be careful." And then the police came back in later. The house across the street from us had people in it. I didn't know it. There was a lot of hotel workers that lived there that do day and night shifts. So there were people sleeping. And that was a big problem with this fire, is a lot of the community does work at night. And so they sleep during the day, and there was no sirens. There was no tsunami alert sirens or anything like that to alert people. So people were waking up because people were banging on doors and saying, "Hey, you got to get out," and coming out and realizing that there was a big fire coming toward them. So that happened. I had asked some of the people that came out of the house across the street, if everyone was out, and they said, yeah, they thought so. And then as it was starting to come toward us quickly, I saw someone come out of the house, and I was like, I thought everybody was out of here. So I went over there and talked to them, and they said, no, there's still a few of us here. So another Maui PD car came in. I said, yeah, there's 5 more people right here that need to go. And so they brought in another cruiser, and we loaded as many as we could into the cars and got them out of there. And they said, you got to go too. And I said, no, again, I'm going to stay here. I have experience with this, and I'll be okay. You don't have to worry about me. So it was just, it kind of made me realize that even though I asked and said, hey, is everybody out of the house? I would have felt better looking back on it if I would have actually gone and checked in a lot of the houses to make sure that there was nobody in them. But on our particular street, everybody made it out and nobody was hurt, so that's good. Later in the evening, closer to 9 o'clock, I saw the fire, started to see a glow in the grass behind my house. So I went out onto the back lanai and was looking at that and noticed that the fire had jumped the bypass and the winds had changed. It was starting to blow a little bit more to the northwest. And it was moving through the grass very quickly, burning around the construction zone. So as I watched it, it went around the construction zone, and there was a car parked on the side of the dirt road that runs behind our house. That car caught on fire, and I could see it, and I thought I'd go look at it, and I took some video of that. The flames from the car were fanned by the wind. It bent the flames across the road, started a fence on fire and a house on fire. And at that point, my heart sank. I thought, our whole neighborhood's gone. There's no way now that we can survive this the way these winds are.
Jumped over several houses up from mine, but this car completely fucked everything by being here. That structure's going. It's gonna wrap around the bottom side of my house.
And so the houses just started burning. The wind started changing. It would switch, blowing to the northwest, and then it would blow west, and then it would blow southwest, and kind of switching back and forth. And a whole row of houses would catch on fire, and it would just burn all the way down to the ocean. And then the radiant heat would catch the next row of houses on fire, and so it was just slowly marching toward our house, moving south. At that point, I thought for sure that our house was going to be gone. So I went inside and started videoing everything that was left in the house and under the house, just for insurance purposes. I thought for sure we were going to be making an insurance claim on a burnt down house. And I also grabbed a few extra things that were in the house, some more clothes, some t-shirts and that kind of thing, and put it in the car. We have our uncle's 1978 Corvette pace car. And so I had that behind, and my plan was to drive out of there in that when it got too bad. Knowing that egress can be a problem, I actually got in the car and drove through our neighborhood to find out if I could get out, like to kind of figure out when my trigger point was and when I have to go. I went down the road, and right there at the highway where our main road comes into the highway, the power lines and utility lines were down, and they were down less than 4 feet off the ground, and some of them on the ground. And I thought, well, I can't go that way. So I started driving to the end of some of the cul-de-sacs, looking for a way out there, and they were just filled with cars. There was no way to get out. So I went back to the house and kind of thought, well, if I have to, I can go out the back gate and just walk to the construction zone and I'll be okay. So the fire progressed. It got worse and worse coming toward us. I kept taking videos, and it was kind of funny looking back at them. Each time I took a video, I was like, oh, this is it, this is it. But because the fire kept changing directions based on the wind.
So Todd, just to take a pic real quick. It's just a couple houses away, and it is 10:45, and she's ablazing. Probably gonna be here shortly. Sorry, man. She's coming slow, but she's coming. There ain't no stopping it.
So I was monitoring everything around the neighborhood and kind of had a plan of, if this happened, I'll do this. If this happens, I'll do that. And I saw that my neighbor's ohana was starting to catch on fire. Ohana is just a small house in the back. So I took video walking up his driveway, and I saw the house catch on fire, and it was built on stilts, which is what ended up kind of saving his house, because it burned from the backside and those stilts gave out and the house tilted away from his house toward the fence and gave a little bit of extra room. There was a lot of radiant heat coming off of that, and attached to his main house was a gazebo. So I was going over there, putting my hand on it. The paint was very hot, so I was kind of watching that. My plan was I had my battery operated Sawzall, and if that caught on fire, I was going to try to cut his gazebo off and push it away from the house and hopefully save it, because I knew that if his house caught on fire, the distance between his house and my house, there was no way that my house would make it. But fortunately that didn't happen because of the way that house, when it fell, it moved away from his house instead of toward it, about 4 feet. So then I was watching the other neighbors' houses. I went in to Uncle Jay's house, and he had chickens back there, and I thought, I got to do something for him. And his one rooster was sitting there on the fence, and I was able to grab the rooster and put him in a cardboard box and put him in the car. So that was the only life I was able to save out of the fire, but he was extremely thankful for that. I have a picture of that with him too afterward. So I just kind of knew that my gut, based on my experience, my gut would tell me when it was time to go. And his house caught on fire then in the back, and I took last 2 little videos of it and saying to him, sorry, Uncle, your house is burning.
The houses behind Uncle are now on fire. Uncle and Todd are next. Sorry, Uncle. There she goes. I'm next. Gotta go.
And that's when I got in the car and left. And I knew, like I said, right at that moment, my gut told me it was time to go. And looking at the security footage, a minute later, just the embers came crashing through there. And how my house didn't catch on fire, I'll never know, because just looking at the amount of embers and the way my house is constructed, it shouldn't have made it through the fire. So it ended up getting to the point where my gut told me it was time to go. And there's some security camera footage of me and the neighbor that stayed behind as I'm driving off. He didn't want to go, and I'm talking out the window to him saying, hey, it's time to go. Right now, we got to go. And then less than a minute later, that's when a huge amount of ember cast came across, and you could just see it washing over all the houses. So I left, I went down, I had to go to those utility lines. I looked at them, and it was kind of surreal. There was a man standing there, and his arms were just completely burnt, the skin hanging off, and there was nothing I could do for him at that point. I had to make sure that I was getting out of there. So I went over to the wires, and I looked at them. The ones that were lowest to the ground were utility, like phone and cable. So I was able to drive with the car, put my hand up and kind of lift them across the top of the car, make it to the right, drive across the power lines that were down, and into the Safeway parking lot. I parked there for a minute, probably 5 minutes, and just watched the fire. And then it was doing kind of what I thought, which was zigzagging based on the wind constantly changing. So at that point, I decided to drive the car to the construction zone behind my house. So I did that and took some videos of that, of what it was like, and was just, again, just watching it and seeing the fire behavior and what I thought it was going to do. So I made the decision to go ahead and go back to my house, walking through the back gate. After watching the fire, it had been about 20 minutes since I had left the front of the house, driven to Safeway, and came to the back. I decided I was going to walk back through my back gate and kind of monitor things from there. In that amount of time, 4 of my neighbors' houses had burned to the ground. So it was really quick And it kind of surprised me that it had gone that fast just watching the wind change. So I came back in and figured, hey, maybe, if an ember gets started at somebody's house, I can go over and stomp it out or something like that. And I just had to sit there and watch as each one of my neighbors' houses caught on fire and burnt. It got to my one neighbor, Kaya's house, and I could see the eaves of his house starting to smoke. It was a single-story house. And I thought, okay, that's going to catch on fire soon. And in the house, I had 3 5-gallon buckets of water because I was doing the paint and sheetrock. So I thought, okay, maybe I can use a little bit of that water, and the winds, if they go favorably, maybe we can do something. So there's security camera footage of that. You'll see me coming across with a bucket of water. As it caught on fire, I threw some water on it and it went out, and then the wind changed. And I thought, all right, maybe I can keep doing this and we'll be okay. Once the other house burns to the ground and the heat kind of lies down, maybe we'll be all right. So it started going again. I went and grabbed a little bit more, about a quarter bucket of water so I could throw it, put it on there, and it went out again. But as I was walking away, it started up again immediately. And I thought, oh man, I don't think I'm gonna be able to do it, but I'm gonna try again. So I got some more water and went back, and I had to pause because the winds changed. It got incredibly hot. And I waited, kind of timed it for when the winds went back in, and threw water on the house again, and it went out, but then immediately caught back on fire. And I thought, well, this is just no good. I need to save the water for a house that isn't already burning now. It was not gonna work. So I had to go back to my house and just kind of watch as that house burnt to the ground also.
And down the side. Got blistering paint that's starting to off-gas and smoke.
Sorry, Kaya, I tried. You kept throwing water on that corner. It was getting too hot for me over there. I didn't have enough help. And then the wind changed. It started coming from this way, that way. And it just blew out your windows and away it went. Nothing I could do, I tried. Sorry.
I went back to my house and just had to sit on my porch and kind of watch as one by one my neighbors' houses burnt to the ground, and felt completely helpless. I just wish if I just had a little bit of water, if that hose would have worked on the hydrant, I would have been able to save a lot. So I took video of that, and I after reviewing the video, I hadn't remembered everything that I took pictures of and video of. I remember apologizing to my neighbor, saying, hey, sorry, I tried, but I couldn't do it. So that was a very helpless feeling for me, being with my experience, knowing what needs to be done, and I just couldn't do it because I didn't have the water. Ended up staying up all night, and as the sun started to come up, I could kind of see how much devastation there was. And at that point, still not having cell service, still not having any news or anything like that, I thought to myself, I think we lost probably half the town. And I didn't realize we had lost the whole town. So my wife was trying to get a hold of me. We had no communication. I assumed she was okay because she's a smart gal, and I knew where she was going. And finally, she was able to get a hold of me in the morning. And I said, no, I'm okay. And she says, you need to get out of there. And I said, I'm not leaving. I've been here too long now. I'm not gonna leave now. So ended up staying there, and she was able to come back later that afternoon. So she came back with my neighbor. The cops actually let them through, and came up to the house, and I said, hey, there's looting starting to happen. We're seeing people running around, so I don't want to leave the house. Can you guys stay here? I need to go wash off, because I was just covered in dirt and soot and ash from being up all night and all through the day.
Don't mean to be cheesy and show shots of what it looks like to be up for 40 hours defending your own home with just dirt everywhere, the shirt of your choice, sometimes boots, sometimes socks, greasy face, baggy eyes, and sometimes you just gotta strip it all off and say, sorry, Popo, hop on your e-bike, cross the line, and go swim in the ocean, because I gotta get these carcinogens off me, and I gotta feel better.
And I got on my little electric bike, and I rode down to Mala Wharf and to the beach down there and jumped in the ocean, that baby beach. And it was just the best feeling ever to just get all of that stuff off of me and kind of refresh. And at that point, I actually kind of broke down because I was in the ocean looking back at the town and just everything was gone. And it would just kind of all hit me, the gravity of it. So I got on my bike after I got out of the ocean and thought I'd take a right on Front Street and head south and see how much of the town was burned. And that's where I went all the way down to the end of Front Street and saw that that's how far the fire had gone. So came back to the house and told my wife that, and then said, you know, I need to sleep. I've been up for, I think it was close to 38 hours that I was awake total. And I said, I need to sleep. So I crashed hard that night. I guess there were helicopters flying over throughout the night and everything, but I never heard any of that. And for some reason, 4:30 on the dot, my eyes sprang open wide awake, and I thought, I need to go document that. So I got on my bike, and I didn't have any of my gimbal or anything, so it's kind of shaky video, but I did about an hour-long video on YouTube where I just went down Front Street all the way to the end and then came all the way back, just so I could let people know, because there was no news, no internet, nothing, if their houses were standing or not. So as I went along, I called out addresses, this is gone, this is here. And it got a lot of views. One of the art galleries posted my video and it ended up getting over 500,000 views. And a lot of the comments were, thank you so much. I was able to see that my house was still there or wasn't there, just so they knew what was going on. So I took that video, and as I was coming out of town, the cops were shutting down and restricting access to all of it. And they were telling me to leave as I was going out. And so I had just barely got that video in before they shut the whole town and didn't really want people to see what was going on. I saw some bad stuff. I saw bodies, I saw animals that were dead, and the carnage. And I tried not to capture that best as I could in the video, but I definitely saw it. And it just kind of was, again, something that was a really heavy gut check for me, because being in the fire service, being on all these fires that I've been to where people's houses burn and having to tell people to leave their house, now I understand why people don't want to leave. From the firefighter perspective, I tell people to leave. I'm like, these people are crazy. Why are they staying here? This place is going to burn. Now I understand, because it was my house in that situation and I did not want to leave. I mean, it's everything that you have, right? Your whole, even though you got most of your important possessions out, it's your home. And so that's definitely made me more empathetic for when I go on fires in the future in California. So I took that video, and my wife was able to come back to the house, and we were just having to watch out for looters. The news that started coming out was reporting that there weren't looters, and there were looters. They were chased out of our neighborhood. They said there's no looting going on. I have video of Foodland wide open, all the alcohol out on the lawn and everything looted from inside that. But for some reason, they just did not want to cover it the way that I'm used to seeing fires covered in California, where they're transparent about it, show the video and the footage. But instead, for some reason, they chose to lock the town down and not let anybody in and have access. People couldn't go looking and sift through their ashes and try to find what was left. They just weren't allowing it for some reason. So as the days went on after that, I remember actually the day of, I took a video of the house, turning, looking at all the burnt down neighborhood, and then panning to my house and just going, I can't believe I made it through this.
Somehow we made it.
Yeah, looking at the house and seeing that almost the whole neighborhood is gone, and looking back at my house and being amazed that it had made it, I thought, wow, we made it. And I thought, wow, we made it, now what? Because we had moved out there because Lahaina it felt like home to us. And now the entire town was gone. And I knew that it was going to take years and years to get it to look like whatever it's going to look like now. And so we decided that we were going to go ahead and sell the house and move back to the mainland because that didn't feel like home anymore. So the looting that was happening, it was in our neighborhood down on the corner house, just about 4 houses down from us. There was about 3 or 4 individuals that were chased off, and we heard from the neighbors that were around that they had seen more. So I made a sign that said, you loot, we shoot, and put it on a shopping cart and parked it at the end of the street, because there was a lot of looky-loos trying to get into that area. And I just wanted people to know that our house was well defended and that wasn't the street that they wanted to come up. And that actually ended up making it all over different social media and media coverage just because there were a lot of National Guardsmen taking their pictures by it and everything. So it was kind of funny to see that all over the place. I had submitted a lot of my footage to my cousin. She's an anchor over on Oahu. And it was just a lot of that footage that you see on a lot of the coverage came from the videos that I took. So at that point, we just decided, what are we gonna do? Let's just wait for a little bit and see how this process goes. And I figured it would take a long time. Hawaii's a little bit different, particularly Maui, because I'm used to California where there's lots of logistics, lots of supplies, and things happen fairly quickly. That's what we do in the fire service. It's just limited over there, and they have not a lot of experience with it. So it became clear to us it was gonna take a long time for that to even feel like any kind of a home again. So we made the decision to go ahead and sell the house and move back to the mainland. So my commute's a lot better. Instead of flying for 5 hours each way, I'm now flying an hour each way from Utah. 2 days after the fire, which would have been on the 10th, a fire engine came down my street, and I had recognized the captain there because I'd met him down at the hardware store before. And I said, "Hey, how are you guys holding up?" And he said, "We burned the whole effing town down." I said, "Wow, I mean, it wasn't you, there was no water, the winds were crazy," and his radio was just going crazy because there was still so much going on, and he kept trying to talk to me and he couldn't. So I went and talked to the firefighter in the back seat, and she said she had lost her home too. So I felt terrible for them. They've been up longer than I have, and they had lost their own homes, and just had that feeling of helplessness of they couldn't stop this fire. So it's different in Maui. One of the reasons we moved out there, we thought, hey, we're gonna move to Maui. We're tired of the wildfires in California. When we retire, we don't wanna have to deal with that. And never would have thought that it would have got as bad as it did out there. I've seen grass fires out there, but they're normally up on the hill and they just burn the grass. So for it to get into the structures and do what it did for so long was something I never thought was gonna happen in that area. I've heard a lot of conspiracy theories about energy weapons, lasers, and weather manipulation and that sort of thing. So from what I've seen in my 20-something years in the fire service, all of it made sense. There was nothing that I went, wow, I don't understand that this happened, because I could see the winds, I watched them, I saw what they were doing. And like I said, if the wind changed, then our neighborhood might be in trouble, and it did. And then when it got into the neighborhood, watching it kind of changing directions, it zigzagged basically around my house because of the winds. So I didn't see anything that led me to believe that there was a conspiracy theory, that there was, this big plan to burn the whole town down. There was just really strong winds, and we knew those were coming. The weather people were saying, hey, there's gonna be a low down there in Kona, and they're gonna get high winds on this island. And so it wasn't a surprise. What was surprising to me was that I was actually home when this happened, because my poor wife, usually when something's going on near our house in California when we lived there, I would be gone on fires and she would be stuck there by herself. So fortunately, I was actually there for this one. But as far as conspiracy theories, people talking about blue cars. I mean, there's a blue car across the street from me that was standing and it was perfectly fine. And it's because the fire burned from the back of the house toward the front, and the front wall was the last thing to fall. And the radiant heat didn't get to that car. People talk about blue houses. Well, I've got video of before and after of a blue house that burnt to the ground. So that stuff, I'm sure there's some science stuff that's behind that, but it did not come into play, in my opinion. To me, it was just the weather. It was just the fact that the wind was blowing so hard. It's kind of like if you start a campfire or a small fire and you blow on it. It was that just magnified with 40 to 50 mile an hour winds with some gusts that were close to 80 miles an hour. My backsliding door on the house blew in. It broke the wall and pushed the door in, which allowed dust and smoke to come into the house. That was the only real damage that I suffered, or that the house suffered. But for the wind to be that strong to break the wall and push the backslider in is just, it tells you how strong it was. A lot of my experience comes from fighting fires all over the state, from Southern California up into Northern California. And one of the big fires that I was on was the station fire in Southern California. And I saw a lot of fire behavior there that was wind driven, that was very reminiscent The Lahaina fire was very reminiscent of the station fire. Just the way that the fire behaved, picked up winds and just rapid progression and covering miles in just a matter of hours. So I didn't have any fire gear out there with me. I was in shorts and slippers and a t-shirt pretty much the whole time. If I had gear, it wouldn't have done me any good because there was just no water. That was the biggest thing, was there was no water. And talking to the firefighters on that engine 3, they were saying that when they did have water, the wind was blowing so hard that their stream would only go out less than 10 feet and the wind was just bending it and pushing it away. So even if they had water, it would have been really difficult. For me, in my neighborhood, if I had water, I had a couple hundred feet of hose, and I know that my first neighbor, where his house, the ohana that caught on fire, I could have stopped that because it caught on fire from radiant heat, not from the wind actually blowing fire against it. And that in turn went down the line and burnt my other neighbors' houses down. So if I had water, there's no doubt in my mind I could have saved a couple of houses for sure. In Maui, in Lahaina, the pump stations for the water are powered by electricity. And as the fire came down Lahaina Luna, one of the things that it hit was the power substation, which knocked the power out, besides the fact that lots of power lines were already down and on the ground. So there was no water being pumped, so there was no pressure. And from what I've seen just through the news is, Kaanapali had water, but they would not release water for it to come down to Lahaina because they said that was their water for up there. So that was kind of frustrating for me, knowing that there was possibly a way to get water to us and they wouldn't do it. Now, at that point, it may not have done any good because with all the houses burnt down, that's all open pipes, from the houses being burnt down and water just flowing. So there may not have been pressure anyway, but I would like to think that the fire department could have at least got some water. But they were doing all they could just to stay ahead of the thing and get people evacuated, which is all you can do. If you can't stop the fire, you gotta get people out of the way. And that's what they were focused on, the fire and the police department. What was going through my mind, it was basically, I was actually fairly calm. For me, it's what I do for a living, and I knew that I could maybe do something, but without the water, I was kind of frustrated. I was kind of, like, if I just had water. So I was just hoping that, maybe if I could do some good, if a cardboard box or somebody's lawn furniture caught on fire next to the house or something, that I'd be able to move it from the house and keep the house from catching on fire. But going through my mind was, as it went on longer and longer, was frustration, because I could watch one house burning and go, okay, my next neighbor's house next to that is going to catch on fire, and I had to sit there and just watch it. And I had the ability, the know-how, I just didn't have the tools to be able to do anything about it. So it was very frustrating for me. I wanted to share the story because there was a couple of things that I learned. The first thing that I really learned was empathy, as I mentioned. After being on fires for years and years, I never fully understood what it felt like to have your house threatened or burned down. And now that I have been through this, it's completely changed my outlook on it. And I'd like to think that that'll help me be better at my job for the next few years until I retire, understanding what people are going through and what they're feeling. The other thing that I learned was the preparation part of it. We moved out there thinking that this was not an area that we were gonna have a big fire like this, and it happened. But after living in California and through my job, my wife and I have always had a plan on, if this happens, here's what we're loading into the car and we're just gonna leave. And I think a lot of people don't think that way. They need to, because there were stories of people that were in the one apartment complex and they didn't leave because they weren't told to evacuate. So people need to realize that in a big situation like that, there's not enough people to go around and tell people to evacuate. You got to pay attention yourself and just go. In the end, it's just property. That stuff can be replaced, lives can't be. So people need to realize you need to have a plan, and you need to take the initiative to go through with that plan and leave in a timely manner before something gets to the point where you're stuck or you can't get out anymore. Because one of the things that we didn't talk about was the traffic problem. So the fire cut off the main highway going out of town on all roads to the south, and people were stuck. There's lots of news stories on it. And behind us, the road behind our house is a dirt road. People were getting onto the bypass, getting onto that dirt road, and it was just car after car after car. I actually have some footage of that, of people, how slow it was. If you can imagine thousands of cars trying to leave a small area and really no way out, and just the chaos of it all with no communications. Nobody had cell phones where they could call and talk to one another and say, hey, this road's open or this one's not. It just was a communication meltdown, and it cost a lot of people their lives. No matter how safe you think you are, you need to plan for the worst case scenario. And you need to have in your mind a trigger point of when you think you need to leave, and you need to stick to that. Because you may think that you can get out of an area, but you don't forget to take into account that maybe roads are blocked and traffic is blocked to where you can't move. So get out early, get your stuff packed up and go. And also don't rely on the government. I mean, we do the best we can as firefighters and police officers and public servants to try to evacuate people, but in a mass scale thing like that, there's not enough people to go around. So you have to stay aware, you have to talk to your neighbors, you have to take your own initiative to get out when the time comes. What's next for us? So we've sold the house over there. We've moved to Utah for now. We're just staying in a townhome, just seeing how we like it. For now, we're not sure. Right now, we're just thankful that we were able to move to Lahaina and experience and live there for a little over 2 years. So my message to people would be, don't hesitate. If there's something you want to do, go do it. Because if we would have waited for retirement to move out to Lahaina, it wasn't going to be there. So if you feel the urge of something nagging at you that says you need to go do something, just go do it, figure it out and live it and enjoy it while you can.